Hey everyone, we're just waiting for VJ to accept the invite to join us. Incredibly excited for this chat. I can't believe it's already episode 3. So just hang tight. And yeah, I see VJ is about to jump on here. Hey, Miriam.
There we go.
All
Okay.
right.
Yeah, for some reason I didn't get that invite, but I guess you got mine.
Oh, no worries, bro. Well, glad you're here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank
I see
you.
I see you're wearing a super powerful blue. I love it.
Yes, I like it too. This is one of my favorite t-shirts actually. I got it many, many years ago.
Yeah.
It's got a couple of holes in it, but that's okay.
Good
Don't
stuff.
we
Hey,
all?
yeah. Hey, Safira. Thanks for joining. Appreciate
Yeah,
it. Well,
man.
now that we have BJ on, let's officially kick off episode 3. I mean, I can't believe that we're already at episode 3. It seems like just a second ago we were talking about making this a real thing, and we're already on number 3, man. So, kudos to you, kudos to what we've created so far. I think we're both incredibly proud of it, and thank you so much for everyone who's been behind us. Hey, there's my partner, Siki. For supporting us and, just giving us all that feedback all along the way. This is very much a community collaborative effort. We really want it to be something by the people for the people kind of thing. So thank you all for your participation so far. We have a really great one lined up for you. So, Vijay, is there anything on your heart today before we get going with today's conversation?
Yeah, I just also want to resonate what you said. It's just we're really appreciating all the interactiveness. Like when we do these things, last couple of times we've posted them like the actual full episode on our respective social medias, on our Facebook and stuff, which we'll keep doing. And eventually we might change the format to maybe a different kind of whatever, but maybe filming it different. But for now, this is what it is. And we will, at the end of this episode, announce our name. And the reason I say that is because that has come through because of all the votes that we got. So we're so appreciate that. And so stay tuned till the end to hear what our name is.
Awesome. Love it. All right. Well, without further ado, we're going to jump into our episode 3 today. And, we're going to do something a little different. In episode 1, we actually did get some feedback in the comments around something that Syra, one of our good friends, she's Soul Family, she asked the question to us. And, it was right at the end, and we felt it was really a big one, right? We didn't want to just really crunch it in at the end there. We knew that we'd be kind of doing the response a disservice to do that. So, essentially, what that question came through for us was, as brown men, what are we doing to really break some of the cycles that we grew up witnessing, right? And how are we managing our unlearning of those things, right? So that the next generation has a different model to look at, if you will, right? For them to emulate. So, I wanted to open up that question to you, VJ, hear your thoughts around
Mhm.
that. And, then I'll share mine as well.
Syra, thank you so much for posing that question. This is like something I'm pretty sure both Josh and I and many other men um, live with and think about. And I think that comes part and parcel with just being a little bit awake and just having the privilege and space in our lives where we can look within and ask these questions. And so I really appreciate that. I mean, I would go as far as saying it doesn't just apply to brown men, it's just men in general. I think there's a, a very important need to break some not so healthy patterns just from previous generations, ancestral patterns that we kind of it's time. And I think first thing is to have conversations like this, is to honor someone like Syra's question and like listen and be like take our time to actually think about it and answer. I obviously come from, I was born in India, so I come from a culture where there are very, very distinct gender sort of roles or expectations. Um, Personally, I've been fortunate enough to be in a somewhat liberal upbringing, where these kinds of conversations have happened. But at the same time, I've seen the sort of the toxic elements of it all. I think first and foremost, sorry, the first thing was having conversations like that. But secondly, it's just to realize and be aware of the fact that there are patterns that we are programmed, whether it's in our DNA or whether it's just because of nurture. Ever since we were raised in families, we've been hearing certain things, witnessing certain things. And so I think it's just the first point is to build this level of awareness. With that requires humility, is to be like, hey, listen, I could have a narrative that I'm not even aware of, and that narrative may not be healthy. So I think that's a very important thing, is to just build this awareness. And how is that possible? It's tricky, because if, let's say, a spouse or a sister or a woman is bringing this up with their male partner or whatever, um, that might be triggering for the man. And so how can, in that moment, and I want to throw this back at you in a second, how in that moment can that man be like, oh, I need to be aware of this stuff, if they're not surrounded by people that are talking this stuff? We might be in a pocket, you and I, Josh, but there are lots of men that are just on autopilot, that just know this is the way it's going to be. I hear stories of people in their 30s where the male counterpart is simply expecting his partner to just adjust to what is important to him. And the woman is just going along with it. That leads me to my very important point. It's not, if I may say this, it's not just the onus on the men. I feel like it's the women's place and time to not accept toxic behavior, to leave the room, to stand up and be like, this is not okay. I'm not going to be okay with this anymore. And I know that takes courage, and I know that that requires overcoming this fear of, what am I going to do if I'm alone? I mean, we're all in it, male or female. This like, oh, I'm going to be single, and this man isn't going to be there for me, so then what am I? Am I going to find another partner? And again, that goes both ways. So I think it's also really important to be like, no, time out. This is not acceptable. It's a boundary I have. And so what are you and we going to do about this? As opposed to just sort of suppressing their own needs and truths. So I'll leave it at that, and then I'd love to hear your take on it as well, and then we can maybe carry on and talk about it more. Uh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate that, man. Thank you. And I know it's not necessarily the easiest conversation for us to try to navigate in real time, right? It's
Mhm.
one of those where, you imagine people have speechwriters to make sure that they don't use the wrong word or
Yeah.
anything like that to communicate on these messages. So, I think the vulnerability is crucial here. You know, I think that, to your point, as men are now, it's more in their face about how we've sort of skewed things in terms of expectations and entitlement and all that kind of stuff. I've seen this happen a lot, right? Where women are using their voice to really communicate, okay, no, no, hang on. I know I didn't bring this up before, but this is what this has actually done to me and made me feel and all of these things, right? And so I see men often the deer in the headlights thing, right? Like, oh, what the hell am I supposed to do now? Right? I
Mhm.
don't know, right? And we just sort of end up in this freeze, right? We don't end up saying anything. We never circle back to it. We're just, oh, hopefully she forgets she asked me that question, right? I've seen it happen so much, right? And so what I also see in this type of situation is, women feel on top of their own lived experience and the exhaustion that comes from that, right? Now they almost feel like, okay, so now you're telling me I need to walk you through this whole thing, right?
Mhm.
Now I need to also be your resource to help you be better for me.
Mhm.
Like, so it's
Mhm.
like this added layer of things, right? So to me, when men are in those situations where they're not necessarily surrounded by other men, they can go and talk about these things through it. I feel like we need to actively pursue these things, right? Because there are groups of men, there are gatherings. It doesn't have to be just men. right? It's, more people are gathering mindfully and with intention so that we can actually have better communication and relationships and actually discuss these things openly, right? Without feeling judgment and attacked. It's more just let's actually look at this thing under a microscope, right? So I think, part of it is really us just getting curious and understanding that, right? I think something that came up in one of our recent episodes too was the Brene Brown, and her concept of, the story I tell myself, right? Perhaps if men find themselves in that situation, right, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know what to do here, right? Let's allow some compassion in the conversation. Of course, we can expect that the other person on the receiving end is going to have their limit with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we maybe get into that practice, maybe one round, two round of, hey, the story I tell myself based on what you just said is, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that we can crack that dialogue open a little bit more, because chances are, because of how long we have created these conditions for women to just hold this, right, and have no way to express it, it'll probably come out in a way that seems aggressive and confrontational and all of these things, right? But we need to have compassion on the other end of it too, because, even though it might not have been exactly us who put those knives in their backs and mistreated them, at the end of the day, we're here, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's a responsibility of all of us to try and navigate this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what I see with that. But from my perspective, things that I've done to really change and have different outcomes to what I've seen over the course of my life, a big one of that is actually not drinking anymore, right? I recently just passed my 2-year mark of not drinking, and a big
Amazing.
motivating factor. Thank you, bro. A big motivating factor for that is, I had this moment where I was thinking about going through memory books, right? Like our family has several photos that they printed out, having books, all that kind of stuff. And I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, you know what? If my kids looked back at a memory book that we created at a moment in time before, right? And they just see me, and it's like every picture seems to have dad with a glass in his hand,
Mm-hmm.
right? I was putting myself in their shoes. I'm like, why does dad always have a glass in his hand? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's he always trying to escape from, right? What's he numbing out from? Like, doesn't he want to be here with us?
Mm-hmm.
Fully present. Because often alcohol is used as a tool of intoxication, of numbing and escapism, right? So it's like that made me revisit my reasons for why I felt I was drinking, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
also saw the different relationships all around me crumbling and in different states of disrepair because
Mm-hmm.
alcohol was seemingly more important than those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just saw that as a huge one, because that often serves as this excuse for poor behavior and mistreatment and not remembering conversations that we had where action was really called for.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, that's just one of the things that I've done. Another one is, anywhere that I possibly can, I offer to women the male privilege that I'm given just by way of being born this way. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, I put out a lot of content, reels and things like that around this, where it's like, why don't we as men take the lead in understanding what the menu and the drinks and the setup and all the aesthetic and the cleanup and all of those things of, say, a social gathering? Why don't we
Mm-hmm.
take that on ourselves without asking, right? Why don't we ask
Mm-hmm.
them, hey, can I fill your cup? Hey, can I get you another plate of food? Why don't we do that? Right. So
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes what that's led to, if I'm being incredibly honest, is I feel a lot of hatred from the men in the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the women are seeing an example of someone of behavior and treatment that they wish
Mm-hmm.
they were on the receiving end of, right? So now, their men are like, oh no, this guy's making me look really bad. We got to get out of here, or I got to create an issue with him so that he's just not in the picture, right? And then on the flip side, which further victimizes women, and I absolutely hate this,
Mm-hmm.
my wife catches strays because of it. Because like, what did you do to deserve this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than celebrating that another woman has now
Wow.
been on the receiving end of this more fair and equal partnership type relationship, where it's not so fixed on you do this, and I do this, right?
Yeah.
So I've seen that, but I got to be willing to do that, right? I accept walking into rooms. I give myself my own pep talk. Josh,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably not going to be liked, bro. And it's just because of how you are. You're going to want to clear the plates. You're going to want to ask,
Mm-hmm.
hey, can I get you anything?
Mm-hmm.
All of these things, these acts of softness, right? And I see it happen from family members of the women. And it's like, hang on, should you not be celebrating this? Right.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, we're kind of going the other way and trying to keep things trapped in time. So, that's another one. I'll just give you a third one. And I have plenty, but I'll just wrap with the third one here for now. We can probably turn this into a whole episode on its own. Is allyship, right? I put myself in a position to be an ally to women in all spaces that I possibly can be.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the biggest demonstration of this for me was actually in the boardroom. Right. Like I actually confronted my CEO. I called him in, not called him out. right after I became aware of some mistreatment that was happening to a lot of my female colleagues.
Mm,
And nothing was being done about this. And this is a historical pattern that I've seen play out in every organization I've worked with, every organization I hear people say that they work for, right?
mm,
So it was just poor behavior and it was just being pushed under the rug. Hopefully, no one heard that type of deal. And I said, no, you know what, this has to stop now because you're not understanding how this impacts culture, how this
mm,
really reiterates that this is acceptable treatment. And then these people go home and this is how they're feeling in terms of their self-worth and how they're valued. So they're not even feeling protected or seen. So this has to change and we need to do something for these people and there need to be apologies. So that's just another example, right? I know not everyone is in this state where they feel like, you know what, that's worth it. That's worth, you know, what I imagine are the ramifications of me confronting my CEO. Well, you know what, to me, the human matter of it all was far more important than anything else. And I felt that because I could effectively communicate this from a place of rationale and showing how this impacts everything after this point of this conversation, I was able to effectively deliver that message. So, you know, effective communication, you know, a lot of things boil down to effective,
mm,
thoughtful communication, right? So that's more of the ways that I've been trying to do that, right? It's unlearning, it's compassion for ourselves because we're going to stumble and fall no matter how committed we are to these changes. But as long as we keep getting back up and having a circle where we feel we can hold one another accountable, I think that goes a really long way,
mm,
right? So, you know, that's what I want to say in response to Syra's question.
mm,
Syra, I know you're busy at the moment that we're recording this live, but you know, I hope that that was impactful in
mm,
response to your question. And you know, of course, I think we're both incredibly open to diving further. You know, should there be specific things that you know you're incredibly curious about but never really got a response to?
mm. I
Anything
love
to
that.
share in response to that, brother? You
Yes,
know, before we move on.
I just love a lot everything that you shared. You know, first of all, I want to say to your partner Suki, how dare you, Suki, to attract such a beautiful man? It's all your fault. No, I'm obviously kidding. But yeah, isn't it ironic? I just want to reflect back. Isn't it ironic and sad that you showing up in your higher vibration is actually triggering people? And you know this, man. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the cracks that they know that exist, or maybe they don't even know that exist within them. And so when this presentation happens, where an empowered, awake man shows up and speaks this way, it can be triggering, and that is the work. I think you're showing up in your work and doing that, and be the change you want to see in the world. Like that's what's happening here. I do want to say just a couple of things. I also grew up definitely in an environment where we would have gatherings at home and all the women would go huddle up in one side, usually 100% of the time near the kitchen, and the men would be in the living room having whiskey, and like, shooting the shit. And that was, I grew up just thinking that's completely the way it is, and having said that, I was very inquisitive. I was very curious as to why this like parting of the seas would happen. So I found that confusing, and I would just go hang out with the kids because it was just like with kids, it was just like it's much more simple. And so I do, however, see that interestingly enough as a natural, this is risky for me to say, but I'll say it, as a natural phenomenon. I do see, even in the Western world, when there is a gathering, that, the women will huddle up and sort of like do some of the, again, I don't mean this because I believe in it, the more feminine sort of things, clear up the kitchen. I've seen it happen and I don't even expect it. But the difference is that I and other brothers that I know will offer, will show up, will be like, can I please do that? Can I help? And what I want, my point here is that that goes a long way, just to be acknowledging and offering that, they are here, that we are here
Right.
to decide what the food should be, or whatever, anything. It doesn't even have to be gender based, but just like, because I don't even necessarily believe in that. But I think it's so important to communicate. And to your point about communicating, um, this is important. I think you touched on this. We as men in our generation may not be the culprits per se. We are actually dealing with what our ancestors did,
Yeah.
And so a lot of times a woman will come up to us and bring it up and we will feel attacked. Like, well, I don't even do anything. You are taking
Yeah.
out taking out your anger on what my ancestors potentially did. And now I have to address it. So initially I would be like, no, I'm not addressing this. I didn't do it. But I don't think that's appropriate. I think that's the opportunity to go like, no, let me try and understand and listen. From on the other side, I think there's a difference between a woman coming at us from a place of anger and victimhood as opposed to empowered and standing strong. It's a fine line.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's easy to navigate to be on this side or that side. I'm just saying from the perspective of a man, if that conversation or topic is coming from an empowered, non-victim, non-angry space,
Mhm.
I think men are going to be more open to being present and listening as opposed to that of accusatory and, you're a man and that's why, it's just a tip to offer, because I think that communication can stop right away, and that we will go and pour ourselves a beer and be like, whatever, but we don't want that, and so I think it's a two-way street. So that's what I'll say about that. And like you said, this is like a 2-hour episode if we
Yeah,
wanted to be this subject.
for sure. No, that was great points, man. Thank you for those tips. And, hopefully, if anyone happens to apply some of these things or even see how they played out for them in their own lived experience, we'd love to see that in the comments, whether that's in this live or in the comments of the posted recording afterwards, right? Because we want to keep this going. We want to help
Yeah,
make sure that people are learning and more empowered and feeling more seen and understood. So appreciate that, man. I think that was really good. So,
yeah.
you know, um, let's
Also,
jump
sorry, one
into,
more thing
yeah,
for
for sure.
everybody, please, if you feel this conversation will help your brother, your husband, whatever, your father, share it with them, because I think that the missing link here is that we can talk about it in our echo chambers, but we want the conversation to be heard and more men to be part of it. So that's all. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Well said, man. So, we'll kick it over to our, usual format, if you will, which is where, we ask each other a question that we did not actually share with one another before this live recording.
Yeah.
We do that so that we can get a genuine, unfiltered, but obviously centered and thoughtful response in real time for you. So, VJ, are you okay with me jumping in with my question over to you?
Hit me, man.
All right. Well, all right. So, I think being in this space of trying to find ourselves and heal and do all of these things, I think there's a lot of judgment that usually comes with that, right? And I think there's a lot of misperception, conception, all of these different things around what this space actually is and is about. And I think once again, it boils down to a lot of marketing, right? Now, my question to you is, because it's come up a lot, and it's not just recently, okay? I see it in the mainstream. I see it as we had our physical space out in Innisfil, Ontario. The different feedback that would come through. So I just want to ask you outright, man, does practicing yoga mean that you're part of a cult?
Man, we must be really synced, man. My question is so similar. That's wild. That's so wild. Um, does practicing yoga mean that we're part of a cult? So, what do you mean by yoga?
So So yoga, as I've seen it, right now, here once again, there's so many
Yeah.
problems with this statement when it comes my way, but I feel like they'll fall asleep or tune out before I get to explain all the
Yeah.
nuances, right? Now, yoga, as I've seen it, right, there seems to be this really poor perception when people gather together to mindfully move their bodies
Yeah.
and to connect with their energy and to find some peace and balance and to just disconnect from the usual goings-ons of the day, right? Whether that's, turn their phone off, hey, I'm going to put on my Lulus and I'm going to go and I'm going to sit in the forest for an hour, right? There seems to be this very cult-esque attachment to these behaviors, right? And to me, the way I see it is that a lot of these things that get called culty are very much about personal empowerment. It's about return to yourself. Remember that you are the driver in this game of life,
Mm-hmm.
right? Remember that you have a lot more of the tools that out there is telling you don't have and need from them. You have everything you need from within,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I find a lot of these practices that bring us back to that core message, right,
Mm-hmm.
are really deemed culty, right?
Mm-hmm.
So A definition that I got from the internet around a cult is it's a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object expressed through ritual, right?
Mm,
So, I to me, so many things based on that definition and based on what they're isolating about the behaviors can be deemed cults, right?
mm,
Be that businesses, be that, are you following sports teams, be that us all singing the same song at the radio somehow, all of these different things, right? They all, in their own ways, exhibit
mm,
traits of this culty behavior. So,
mm,
I
mm,
feel there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of people lock themselves out of these spaces and these experiences and even
mm,
getting curious about these things because
mm.
of the fear that they're going to be perceived as being a cult member or cult leader.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, man, beautiful. And I almost want to throw in my question right now because it's kind of so similar. My question was, and I'll come to your thing. My question was, what does it mean to be spiritual? And so I think it's all tied in. So first and foremost, I want to say the reason I asked you what you mean by yoga is because yoga is the when we in the depending on where we are born, where we're raised, where we live, socioeconomic reality, when we hear the word yoga, we believe different things. Okay, so somebody that is from a traditional family in India will not see Lululemon, and they are born and raised there. Somebody that is practicing yoga here will think yoga studio, teacher training, Lululemon, blocks, yoga mat, hot yoga.
There we go.
You know,
Yeah.
you know and so I teach a class on cultural appropriation of yoga, and one of the most important things that I say is that yoga has 8 limbs, only one of which is the positions we do on a mat. And what people think in the West when they think yoga is called asanas. Okay. So when we say a yoga studio, 99% of the yoga studios in North America just offer asana practice, forgetting the other 7 limbs of yoga. So yoga has nothing to do with religion. And I know the definition of cult you said had the word religion in it. Yoga has nothing to do with religion. Somebody who has never been on a yoga mat and never done, dancer's pose or tree pose and practices breathing before reacting is a yogi.
Mm.
Somebody that believes in non-violence is a yogi. Somebody that has the ability to focus, dhyana, dharan, and to contemplate is a yogi. These are yogic practices. These are the different limbs of yoga. Somebody that can withdraw from desires is a yogi. Okay. Now, you don't have to be brown. You don't have to be man, woman, whatever. You don't have to be North American. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to have a yoga studio. You don't have to yoga mat to believe that taking a few breaths changes our physiology and our
Mm.
brain chemistry, you know? And so I start off by saying this is a massive misconception of what it is to be a yoga practitioner. So that's number one, is like we're just, when we think, oh, you do yoga, the conversation is right off the bat, in my opinion, inaccurate, because I know what you're thinking when you're saying yoga,
Mm.
Now, the spiritual piece, okay, is where it gets culty, okay? So this is the thing. It's like, what does it mean to be? So I've had people come up to me when I'm like on the beach dancing, They come up to me and it's like, this has happened a couple times. VJ, I'm so surprised to see you with a beer in your hand dancing on the beach. I thought you were spiritual. I'm like, what? Like, so what do you think that I was? Oh, I just thought that you like woke up in the morning, meditated and drank yogurt and, whatever, And I was like, no, I don't do only that. And yes, I dance on the beach. And yes, I consider myself spiritual. What do you mean by spiritual? I thought spiritual people, so there's this idea that people who are spiritual sit around in circles, share cacao, drink medicine songs. And to be honest with you, it is kind of culty. Like, it is, I've seen it and lived in it, where there is a community of people that speak a certain language, like, um, for example, somebody who smokes weed in a spiritual community, they don't say I smoke weed, they say I work with cannabis. And they're doing the
Okay.
exact same thing. So there's this like weird language that goes on,
Mhm.
Um, oh, thanks for your opinion. Oh, thanks for witnessing it. And so there is a certain, and I don't mean to like put it down, but there is an actual vernacular and language that goes on in those circles. And that's what comes off as culty. That's
Yeah.
what comes off as almost too superficial and fake, because you're just, in essence, wearing just another costume. I used to wear the 9 to 5 corporate costume, and now I'm wearing the I don't give a fuck about paying the bills, 108 bead mala costume. So it's from one costume to another costume, where with and the essence of the person remains exactly where they are.
Mhm.
So the judgment is happening to my boss. Now the judgment is happening to that senior yoga teacher that's getting more classes than I am. And
Yeah.
so there is it's a very valid question. I think that it can be very culty, and it's become very culty. I felt like on the outside of it, I felt times in my life where I want to be part of that. And I've been like shunned and all this kind of stuff. So it does have that for sure. I'm blabbing. Tell me what's on your mind.
No, I love that, man. I appreciate the honesty, especially given your expertise, right, about yogic practices, right? And you yourself being a facilitator of so many different types of experiences, right? Where I'm sure you get these types of personalities rolling through and expecting a certain outcome from these experiences,
Mm,
right? Now, I've seen the same thing. I find that when anything, right, if we take anything and we see people elevated to this performative nature, right? Where they're trying to create this distance between regular people and them so that they can charge a premium price.
well said.
That's where I find all of
Yeah,
this happens, right?
yeah,
Because now it's all of a sudden, oh, you want to become a master meditator? Okay,
yeah,
well, make sure you sign up for courses 1, 2, 3, and 4,
yeah,
and then make sure you also go on that grand expedition we're going to do,
yeah.
right? And make sure you pay it all up front, right? Like all of these things, it's so loses the true essence of what we started off with. It's like going to the gym and then, we're doing that for our health and then all of a sudden we're on steroids and creatine and, all this kind of
Mhm,
stuff, right? And all of a sudden it becomes about everything other than health, right?
mhm,
So that's what I find happens, and that's where the disconnect comes, because oftentimes the way people vet credibility is based on visibility, right? So,
mhm.
you know, um, brother so and so over here wearing the white outfit, meditating on the mat at the beach. Oh, wow, he has 40,000 followers. He must really know what he's doing, right? So that's where they go versus, for example, I know you and I lean into more of the organic growth, for example, right? So
Mhm,
if someone comes across, you and I with a relatively smaller following than so and so with this grand, studio with all the camera angles and everything's always perfect, chances are, if it's their first experience, they're going to feel safer to go
mhm,
there, right? But what I
mhm,
find is that people often go there, right? They either get really turned off by the practices, they either join the cult,
mhm,
right? Or then they start to say, hey, hang on, something seems off here. Like this seems to have
mhm,
swung way too far to this end of the spectrum of what this thing is supposed to be. Let me try and find myself in a more, balanced and rooted version of this,
mhm,
right? Which is where, for example, you dancing on the beach, right, with a beer in your hand, that could be seen as a bit of a balance, right? Because it's
mhm,
not this guy who's just up in the mountain until he has his 9 a.m. yoga class, comes down and goes back up to his mountain and he just drinks cacao, right? So I find like just having more of these open conversations is what's necessary. And I don't expect the honesty and vulnerability, if I'm being absolutely
mhm,
honest, from the practitioners, because at
mhm,
the end of the day, most of them are in it in order for this to be a job and a source of income, right?
mhm,
So their intention is
mhm,
not necessarily to give you that utmost clarity, right,
mhm,
around all of this stuff and empower you, right? Because then you'll just sit at home because you'll know, oh, everything I need is within me and I can do this.
mhm,
Music's going to
mhm,
come, right?
mhm,
So, I find that we just need to unpack it within our own communities. Like, I think a lot of us have these experiences. We think it, but then we
mhm,
don't want to be that one person who says it out loud,
mhm,
even within the people we allegedly feel safe with, right? So
mhm,
that's kind of what I see when it comes to that. And, like this culty behavior and like thinking about it from a broader perspective, we just watched the mini series Breath of Fire, right? Where they
yeah,
talk about Kundalini yoga and how that was used as part of the way that this group organized and things like that, and people felt like it was really culty and all that kind of stuff. So,
Mm-hmm.
like I go back to the marketing, right? This is what hits streaming services, right?
Yes.
That's what hits it. And that's what people are going to be exposed to first. So we're assuming that they're going to then use their own discernment and judgment around that to say, hey, hang on. No, there has to be something else here. Let's look for sides 2 and 3 of this truth. You know what I mean? So that's what I find happens in it. And we can look around corporate structure, right? We could see those seem culty,
Mm-hmm.
right? Pyramid schemes, those are culty.
Mm-hmm.
Going to a hockey game and, we're trying to egg on the other team. So we're going to sneak in a dead fish or an octopus. Hang on. Are we not now doing an animal sacrifice? Right? How is it that we all know this song and, one person over there starts singing it. All of a sudden we're singing this, oh, F you refs, and we're doing the wave all in coordination. Like, oh my goodness, is that not a cult? We're wearing these jerseys. We're paying our good hard-earned money for these jerseys of someone else's name on the back,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we're walking around promoting this.
Yeah.
Like this is what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
we're not revisiting these things at a very core level. So I guess at the same time, we then can't be expected to then analyze and figure out these more complex and layered scenarios, such as
Mm-hmm.
being in a yoga practice and studio. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's what I see. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you have any thoughts around that?
I mean, yes. What's coming up for me is that who isn't in a cult then? You know, and it's really true. Such a great point you brought up about sports teams. I was in Brazil with my dad recently, and we went to this team called the Corinthians. They're like one of the most like their fans are like mad. They had many years ago. They had a final in Japan. Their fans who were not that well off would sold their homes, their only homes, their cars to buy a ticket to Japan just for one match. Okay? And they came back home homeless, to Brazil homeless. So that level of blind dedication, loyalty, only being on that one side, don't mention the opposing team's name, that's culty. Being a Republican or a Democrat, like either way, whether you're conservative or you're liberal, like you're part of a cult in that sense as well. It's like aren't we all in some way, shape, or form? And so I think that piece about balance is key, right? Is to bring a little bit of balance in the belief system, open-mindedness. Okay, so if I'm doing this hardcore core all the way, then maybe I should bring it back to the center a little bit, be aware of it, that kind of stuff. I think that's very, very important. And there was one more thing that came up for me. Was oh my God, I'm blanking. Yeah, I'm blanking right now. But yeah,
No.
I mean, just basically the idea here being that I think as long as we bring it back to performative, right? As long as the moment we start feeling that we are actually breaking out of our true essence and into a state of performance or people pleasing or trying to fit in, I think that's the barometer. I think that's the red flag. It's like now I'm sacrificing my own truth to be like, yeah, I believe in chemtrails as well. Because if I don't believe in chemtrails, then you will think that I believe in XYZ as well, but I don't. So I have to just morph my belief system and agree to you. I'm not saying chemtrails I believe or not. I'm just saying like that's a lot of that happens, and that comes from I think this lack of self-love where we want so badly to belong to a group, to belong, to feel like we belong somewhere, that we give up our own autonomy and our own truth. And that I think is the essence of why people are in cults, because they want to feel like they belong in something. I know somebody that went from being agnostic to believing hardcore in plant medicine and all the um, the indigenous belief system, the Mayan belief system, and all that stuff, to then realizing that she wasn't really fitting in there, and now she's a born again Christian. So she's just gone from one group to another. I'm call them cults or not, but I, the one thing she hasn't done is actually subscribe to what is actually true for her,
Right.
you know? So yeah, I think that we can avoid, you know, becoming part of a cult by developing self-love. Easier said than done.
Absolutely. No, I love that, man. That was super well said. I really appreciate that contribution to it. I think just to wrap up this question from me, I think that what I see at least is that, the biggest cults, live in denial of their own existence, right?
Mm,
And they point the finger and say, cult,
yeah,
cult, cult, right? Because that's how they survive,
yeah.
right? So, I think if we just start to examine the word, why we've held on to it for so long, what does it actually mean? What does it mean to us? And then examine it in the broader perspective of what does real life show me about this word and the structure, right? Then we can detach from it. Then we can actually get to the real work, right? Because tossing the
Yes.
word cult is
Yeah.
almost like telling someone, shut up, or I'm going to toss
Yeah.
you off this ledge right now,
Yeah.
right? So
It's
I think we need to make
accusatory.
sure that I think we need to make sure that we create safe spaces for us
Yeah.
to actually talk about these things,
Yeah.
much like that. So appreciate that, man. Did you want us to dive more fully into your question that you brought to the table for today?
Well, yeah. I mean, let me just quite simply, what does it mean to be spiritual to you?
Hmm. To me, you know what, it's something that's evolved over time. Before I myself got into, being in service and all that kind of stuff in my own ways through, different offerings and stuff like that. I think like everybody, I kind of just piece. What did I hear here? What did I hear here? That's what it looks like. To me, it was like, these are people who don't have a care in the world. They sip kombucha and, they're always wearing the same thing. That's kind of what being spiritual looked like and felt like to me before I did any personal investigation into it, right?
Mm,
Now, as I've evolved and met different humans, in different places and all that kind of stuff, I see it's more just a way of life, like a lot of things, right? Spirituality, like to me, it just means that you kind of are connected to yourself. You understand what it is that you believe, right? It's not a matter of confirming that what you believe is right or wrong through another person. It's more just being sort of firm in your own belief about something, right?
mm,
Having that courage and that self-confidence to feel like, hey, you know what? It's okay for me to pursue my alignment and my purpose in this lifetime. I get that there are all these other factors that come to me by way of this being life, right? But I'm deciding for me what my life is going to be versus just accepting this template that's being laid out for me, right? So
mm,
spirituality is that balance. I think you've given me the perfect image to imagine spirituality in real life as a practical application, right? Like dance on the beach with a beer, right? I don't drink, right? But I get the relevance of that, right? Because it's not so ivory tower, like give up everything you've known about yourself, hand over your life to me. I'm going to tell you how you need to be, whatever, right? And you become some follower of something,
mm,
right? It's very much just about this connectedness, right?
mm,
That freedom, that confidence to explore who you actually are versus accept this story about who you allegedly
mm,
are, right?
mm,
And that confidence
mm,
to keep moving through it.
mm,
Spirituality is very much rooted in the word faith to me, right? Like having faith that things will work out for you, right? It's not that I'm just going to sit here and be like, hey, I got faith that, five things are going to happen. I'm just going to sit here and wait for it. My faith is going to deliver all five of those things to me right now, right? It's very much like the law of attraction. A lot of people really took that and really swung it in a way that really made me mad, right? It's like, yeah, I'm going to sit here, law of attraction is it's going to find me. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And they feel like they disproved it.
mm,
No, like you need to put in, there's input and output, right? And, something that I've heard is that, when you put out something at this level of vibration, the universe has no choice,
mm,
right? It's just a law of the universe. It has no choice but to meet you here or higher, right?
mm,
So, giving myself a chance to actually see, okay, God, Josh, without me trying to control the situation, is this true, right?
mm,
I got to see, yes. Okay, so then I start to build my feeling of connectedness, not only to myself, but to all of the ecosystem around me, right? It's seeing yourself in all of these things, right?
mm,
And I think something that's come to me, and I don't know if this is going to sound culty or hippie-ish or whatever, but like I almost, as life has shown me, I almost feel like we get this body this time, and then when it's all over, we're going to come back as a caterpillar, and then we're going to come back as this and that and whatever. We're going to get to experience life in all these different forms, right?
mm,
Because it's like, why am I crushing this ant? This ant did
mm,
nothing to me, right? But at the same time, if I parallel that to a lot of things, we crush a lot of people in society for no damn reason, right?
mm,
So I feel like the universe is just giving this privilege of this body, for example, to see it from this perspective. But there's
mm,
so many other perspectives. And I think that's what spirituality is. It's allowing space for multiple things to be true at the same time. It's not about dominating and saying, "Hey, VJ, you're wrong, I'm right." And if you don't follow what I'm saying, I guess you're not spiritual, man. I guess that's just the way the cookie crumbles, right? It's that, like that. That's how I see it,
Yeah.
right? It's allowing yourself to truly be who you are and to see yourself in things, right? Something that has come onto into my awareness by way of my partner, who is family is Sikh. They're from Punjabi, or sorry, Punjab. Is that they see themselves like everything is one, right? And I said, wow, what a concept, because like as I've grown up, I grew up in a Christian environment, right? And it was very much it's just this. That's all there is, right? And then there was almost like a hierarchy established with anything that was not this. So to me, it's like, wow, okay, oneness. That's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful way to look at it. So that to me is how that's my working definition of spirituality at this present moment.
Love it. So many things you said resonated so much. I thank you so much for sharing that. Just coming back to um, what you said about law of attraction, isn't it ironic and funny that the quest to disprove law of attraction is the very thing that will continue to give you evidence that it doesn't exist. It's like because you're at that frequency, like, oh, it's not real, it's not real. So of course it's not gonna work because you're at that, you're like, that's exactly what you're attracting.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so what I want to say is that, again, it's a word. We talked about this last episode, right? Or first episode actually. What is it? uh, the weight of a word as opposed to the energy, the intention behind it. And when I'm in India and I've been there and my for a little while, a few weeks, so that my algorithms and my IP address is like ticking India, and if I Google the word spiritual, a different set of images comes up than when I am here in Canada. So if I Google spiritual here, I will get things related to the church. If I Google spiritual somewhere else, it's a different thing. And what's always interesting, because there's always an essence of religion in it. But I like what you said. It's like just um, I think you said something like being, uh, having like an open mind or something like that. You said having faith in the fact that everything is going to work out for us. I really like that at all. To me, and my definition keeps evolving, and I need to, for my own purposes, attach this for right now, is the act of being spiritual. Like, I want to simplify it as much as I possibly can.
Yeah.
You see, we are observing, we're walking this, we're the universe in this human body, walking this planet right now, and we're constantly hit by presentations, by stimuli, by the cold wind, by the sound of a bird, the taste of a food, somebody yelling, whatever. And so our conscious and subconscious is always observing something. To me, the practice of spirituality is to pay attention to what we're observing. In other words, is to bring awareness. It's all about awareness to me. Anybody who is practicing consistently mindfulness and awareness is practicing spirituality. Okay. And that could be, you could be wearing what one wears at a mosque. You could be wearing an agnostic's costume. You could be wearing orange. It doesn't matter at all. You could be a 6-year-old kid who is just practicing being mindful and aware. Because I think that is the very first step towards anything else, any other thing, uh, any next step. The first ingredient is awareness, is the fact that if you want to I don't know, if you want to build your back muscles, the first step is to be aware of the fact that my back muscles need work. The
Yeah.
first step is always awareness. It's if we're in the blind place, we won't know what it is that we need to work.
Yeah.
When I know I need to eat, the first thing that happens is I'm aware of the fact that I'm hungry. If I'm not aware of it, and sometimes a lot of people in the workflow cannot even be aware of the fact that they're hungry, they're not going to eat. So if there's a conflict with somebody in my life, the first ingredient is to be aware of how that happened. What did I say? What did they say? What was the thing that was triggering for me? What is the story that I'm telling myself? It starts from that awareness piece. So for me, spirituality is simply paying attention to what we are observing,
Mm.
as much as possible. And then the rest sort of can hopefully fall into place. I just want to help people sort of redefine what these expectations are, to be a yogi. Like, no, you don't have to be flexible, and you don't have to have a membership at a yoga studio. You don't have to om. You don't have to know what this means.
Right.
You don't have to XYZ. You don't have to be going to church to be spiritual, or to be, to know who Ramakrishna is, to be, um, there are tribes in the middle of the Amazon jungle that have no idea who Jesus Christ is, but they could be spiritual.
Yeah.
They could practice kindness. They could practice being aware and mindful. In fact, they probably are super mindful of all the bird sounds and all the soil densities and all the things in order to survive. They
Mhm.
are maybe super spiritual. So that's what I want
Yeah.
to say about
No, I love that. And it's so true. Like in all of our conversations so far, recorded or not, I think we're really seeing the importance of the weight that we put on words, right? Because, like you're
that.
saying, tribes in the Amazon, for example, they might not have awareness of these terms that we use out here, but they could be closer to it than any of us, right? And it's the mere fact that we're trying to use a word to tie to our identity that we're limiting ourselves, right? And judging others, right? Which goes against the whole idea of being spiritual.
Yeah.
So it's very, very interesting, man. And I think you bring such a unique lens to it, being at the forefront of so many different experiences and just, trying to lead others and be their guide in so many different ways. So thank you for the work that
And
you
you
do because
too.
thank
You
you.
too, brother. Yeah, absolutely. I just, sorry to interrupt you, but there's just so much presence and care in all your shares. And I mean, I can only imagine all of the other stuff that goes on in your brain and your heart, I feel like your shares are just the tip of the iceberg. And I've seen you journal. I've seen you,
Yeah,
stand for an hour and a half
yeah,
and just journal in front of the lake. So
yeah.
I know what goes on. It's beautiful.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think, I hope that this conversation, how we've chosen to go about it, I hope that brings a unique lens, lets everyone think about it differently and helps them to really come at it from a space of love. Love for themselves first and foremost, is what's going to open the door for them to allow love to sort of be a leading factor in other things. But, I think it ties back to ourselves, right? I think that's a really great way for us to wrap this one. But, I
Well,
know that you
no.
shared. I know,
Yeah.
I know. I'm gonna flip it over to
Yeah.
you because I know you
Bringing
got
it
an
back to
important thing you want to
ourselves.
say. Take it away, my friend.
Yeah, we are so, so excited. I think this feels really good in our bones, this name, right? So
Yeah.
we had a a long list that led to a short list of names, and there was a lot of resonance in it all. And so I'm going to say it.
Yep. Go for
This
it.
this podcast is called Soul Flow Radio, hosted by the Feel-Osophy brothers. So Josh, you and I are the Feel-Osophy brothers, and maybe one day there will be more Feel-Osophy brothers. But
Absolutely.
the name of our show is Soul Flow Radio, and so we'll be working with that name. I'm sure you and I will talk about a logo and just that kind of presence for it all. It'll all flow. And how beautifully it has just happened. Coming back to our very first episode where we were like, I'm just so glad we're starting instead of being like, what's the exact logo? What's the domain name? So here we are, Soul Flow Radio.
I love it, man. My philosophy, bro. I love it.
Yeah, I love
It's
it.
so interesting that somehow philosophy works its way back into my life because that was actually one of the degrees I was pursuing in university.
Yeah. Oh,
Philosophy. And,
okay.
it kind of comes full circle. It's kind of like, you know what? At that point, I left it behind because I'm like, you know what? I'm more interested in new thought. What am I thinking
Yeah.
versus regurgitating what other people are thinking? So
Yeah.
I find it so full circle, almost like the yurt,
Yeah.
if you will, that it comes back to this. And it's like from a place of just feeling like we want to share new idea and thought and bring that to the forefront. So
Yeah.
super excited to be
And
on this
it's
journey with you, man.
philosophy. So
Feel off.
feel just for the audience. So it's Feel, because we feel, we're feelers. Okay, that sounds weird. Brother, thank you so much. What a beautiful, beautiful chat. And look forward to next week.
As do I. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, for showing love in the comments, and we look forward to all your feedback. Remember, this show, Soul Flow Radio, is just as much for us as it is for you. So very much encouraged to make it your own. Talk to us. Let us know what's on your heart, what you want to hear us talk about, what you want us to explore. It's all fair game. All right. And it's all love. So thank you all. We'll see you next time.
Ciao.